There was all this hype a few months back about an informant for the House Oversight investigation into President Biden, a mystery person who could supposedly produce the smoking gun and prove once and for all that the president was corrupt, cashing in on his office.
We have basic information with respect to what the informant has alleged, and it's very serious. It alleges that Joe Biden, when he was vice president, was involved in a quid pro quo with a foreign country in exchange for foreign aid. This is a very serious accusation.
It is very serious as an accusation, but then somehow this highly credible informant disappeared. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer dropped the bomb on Fox News.
Well, unfortunately, we can't track down the informant. We're hopeful that the informant is still there. The whistleblower knows the informant. The whistleblower is very credible.
Hold on a second, Congressman. Did you just say that the whistleblower or the informant is now missing?
Well, we're hopeful that we can find the informant. Now, remember, these informants are kind of in the spy business. So they don't make a habit of being seen a lot or being high profile or anything like that.
And it happens that this informant is also a fugitive from justice. We learned last week that this previously unknown informant, a man named Luft, is and was a fugitive, indicted in November of last year for, among other things, working as an unregistered foreign agent to advance the interests of China. In the newly unsealed indictment, federal prosecutors say Luft, quote, agreed to and did engage in political activities in the United States on behalf of China Energy Fund Committee, China Energy Fund Committee China, and Chinese National One, it's the name of a person without naming them, in an effort to seek to influence United States foreign policy toward and the public perception of China, and concealed these efforts by creating the false appearance that they were simply the sharing of sincere opinions of an independent expert on national security and international relations. It is a truly ironic turn of events, given all the attempts to tie the president and his families to nefarious activity in China. And that may explain why just 2 days later, Chairman Comer scurried back to Fox and tried to dial back the expectations.
Did someone take him, seize him, kidnap him, put him in the witness protection program? Where is this guy?
Well, as you know, Larry, we're dealing with a lot of informants because the Bidens were influence peddling all over the globe. The informant that I was referring to on Maria's show Sunday was the informant on an Israeli situation.
Oh.
He was an Israeli. The informant that Grassley brought forward that's alleging to have evidence of Joe Biden himself being directly involved in a pay-for-play scheme with a foreign national, he is alive and well.
Alive, well, and it turns out facing an 8-count indictment. Oh, and he's on the run. But, of course, that didn't stop some of the most radical members from continuing to cite this as some sort of smoking gun.
Yes, they are missing. They're either in court, they're in jail, or we cannot talk with them at this time because they can't be found. This is a very real situation that we're talking about, and our investigation is so important, Steve, that this will bring down the President of the United States.
Now, of course, as we now know, the man who some were saying was going to help bring down a presidency is facing a whole heap of trouble himself. Luft, the co-director of a Maryland-based think tank, is facing an 8-count federal indictment for charges related to arms trafficking and failing to register as a foreign agent. Prosecutors accuse Luft of brokering arms deals between Chinese companies, Iran, and countries in the Middle East. Convicted on all charges, he faces the possibility of decades in prison. Luft has vehemently denied these charges and claims that this is revenge from the DOJ. So let's bring in Robert Henoch, attorney for Luft. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Appreciate it. Before I ask you about the substance of your defense, your client is currently a fugitive from justice. Is that correct?
My client was absent himself from a proceeding in Cyprus. That's correct.
And so he's now wanted. Is that Is that fair to say?
You can use that term if you'd like. If you'd like to hear more about his side of the story, I'm happy.
I would, and I'm going to absolutely let you do that, but I'm just trying to figure out first why he won't even appear in court for any of his proceedings.
Well, let's get the timeline straight because you have it wrong.
Okay. So you can change the subject. Go ahead. Okay. What is the timeline?
Okay. The timeline is in March of 2019, Dan. My client and I went to Brussels. We met with federal prosecutors from the Southern District of New York. They had assured me and the client that they would fully investigate what he had to tell them. This was before President Biden announced his candidacy. We could have taken ourselves to the media. We could have gone to the Congress. We decided to go to the federal prosecutors because my client wanted to do his duty as a good citizen and tell them what he knows. And what he revealed to them was extraordinary, and it predated the indictment. So let's just make sure we have the timeline straight.
I don't think anything I don't think anything I said suggested that what I was talking about was some who are claiming now in 2023 that the indictment, which just became public, was retaliation, even though the indictment came in 2022. But just so I understand, you're claiming that this is retaliation from the DOJ for a 2019 meeting in which he tried to inform the Department of Justice of information about Hunter Biden. But in 2019, the Justice Department, under the control of Bill Barr and theoretically President Trump, didn't want to hear it, and as a result, your client was punished.
I don't have anything to say about Bill Barr or President Trump. That's irrelevant to me. We went there apolitically, not as Republicans, not as Democrats. We went there with a report of extraordinary corruption at the highest levels. And what I think should be made clear is what my client told the prosecutors was that there was a mole in the Federal Bureau of Investigation that was passing information through the Bidens to highest level members of the Chinese Communist Party in exchange for money. And that mole, that investigation has, as far as I know, as a private citizen, has never gone anywhere. And no one's talking about it. Well, people are talking about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and James Biden, which is obviously something important, but no one's talking about a mole. Robert Hansen was a mole in the FBI for 22 years. The FBI, from what I could tell, the U.S. government, from what I could tell, has done absolutely nothing with these allegations. As you know, Dan, from being in the system yourself, there's a lot of things that can be done to try to find a mole. Right. And the fact that nothing has been done is extraordinary. But again, you're saying this happened. And I'm sure that many federal judges and many federal prosecutors and many criminal defense attorneys would like to know if the investigations, the prosecutions, the trials that they're holding are in fact compromised. Okay. Because of this highly placed mole.
So just so we're clear, you're saying that you went to the FBI, you went to the government, the prosecutor's office. Again, you think it's irrelevant that it's overseen by Bill Barr. I can assure you that everyone seems to think it's relevant who's in control of the DOJ. That Bill Barr was in charge of the Department of Justice at the time that you brought this information, and you're saying, and the U.S. attorney there was appointed by Bill Barr, and you're saying that U.S. attorney didn't investigate this, as far as you know. I mean, they may have investigated it, right? And that at that time that they ignored it, and now the retaliation came in 2022 for him coming to the government in 2019?
Well, I think respectfully, Dan, your premise is erroneous. I don't think necessarily whoever is in charge of the Justice Department in any given moment, whoever the Attorney General is,
that's true,
or even who the president is. If there's institutional bias within the institution, there's institutional bias.
But what about the timing? 2019, and they punish him in 2022, right? They were waiting for 3 years to figure out how to get him back?
I don't know what they were doing, but clearly they weren't investigating what he was telling them, because there's still a mole in the FBI, and there's still these allegations that are out there.
Well, you don't know that there's a mole in the FBI. You know that someone's alleging that there's a mole in the FBI, and it's the same person who I would think you would want to recommend might want to show up in court and not remain a fugitive from justice. No?
My client is in fear for his life. My client is willing to testify if he's called to do so, if he's subpoenaed. And I want to make
wait. Your client is willing to testify of subpoena, but he won't show up, even though he's a criminal defendant in a case? That's nonsensical.
I don't agree with you whatsoever. Okay. He is a defendant in a case that was trumped up against him because he told the government things they did not want to hear.
So I didn't know that defendants get to choose when they can go to court or not. I didn't realize that was optional for defendants to show up in court or not. But if he gets a subpoena in another case, he'll show up. You get the final word.
Okay. I think there's a few whys, Dan, and I appreciate the final word. Number one why is why is one of the prosecutors who's assigned to this case, why is she, in fact, a contributor to the sitting president's campaign when she's in charge of investigating that same person? Why is it that the Attorney General of the United States has allowed that to happen? I don't care if he's Republican or Democrat, Dan, it makes no difference to me. Why is it that this whistleblower case, why was he not arrested in Israel where he lives? Why Cyprus? Yeah. Why is it that when I informed the Cyprus authorities that I was his lawyer and I didn't want the consul general and the American consulate to approach him, they approached him? Why did the ambassador to Cyprus contact the judicial authorities in Cyprus and demand that he be remanded without bail?
All right,
there's a lot of why questions, Dan, that an investigation that's not conducted by anybody with an axe to grind on your side, on the other side.
Again, my why is a lot simpler. Why doesn't he just show up for court? That's why is he a fugitive from justice? Not tough questions, but ones that, you know, I appreciate that you may not have answers for. But Robert Henoch, he's got a good lawyer, and I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.